Hi there everyone, so surprise it's my voice. Some people wanted me to try and do previous content with my voice instead of the bot, so depending on how the next few videos do, I may use my voice from now on. Let me know what you think below. In Starcraft 2, the drones are the first playable unit. Drones used to look like this in Starcraft 1, but now look like this. Drones are the only unit for the Zerg that can build and gather materials. Drones differ from the probes and the SCVs of the Protoss and Terran in that they can only slowly regenerate health as opposed to the fast recharging shields of the probe or the repairable hit points of the SCV. Drones move by hovering above the ground using a float bladder that disrupts gravity around the drone, effectively making them swim through the air. Drones were originally called Gashir Wasps from the planet Eldesthene before they became assimilated into the swarm. Overlords used to look like this in Starcraft 1, but now look like this. In Starcraft 2, the Overlords are the second playable unit. Overlords provide control over other Zerg units. The more Overlords, the more Zerg. Unlike most other Zerg breeds, Overlords have a greater capacity to act on their own judgment, though their mental flexibility is still severely limited. Overlords used helium-filled gas sacs and a weak telekinetic psi ability for lift and motive power. Overlords were evolved from the Gargantis Proximae, a species of giant spacefaring and semi-intelligent creatures which volunteered to be assimilated in order to avoid extinction. Zerglings used to look like this in Starcraft 1, but now look like this. In Starcraft 2, the Zerglings are the third playable unit. Zerglings are the most numerous of the Zerg mutations, forming the bulk of the Zerg swarm. Zerglings in the Heart of the Swarm campaign can morph into two other variations, the Raptor strain on the left and the Swarmling strain on the right. The Raptor strain leaps over obstacles and onto targets from range. It can also jump up and down cliffs. The Swarmling, as the name suggests, allows the creation of more Zerglings, increasing the spawn rate of the Zerglings from 2 to 3 and spawning them straight away. Zerglings also appear in World of Warcraft as pets and as mounts in Heroes of the Storm. Zerglings were evolved from the Dune Runner, which was a small and savage creature native to the desert world of Zagash. Queens used to look like this in Starcraft 1, but now look like this. In Starcraft 2, the Queens are the fourth playable unit. In the second mission, you meet the first Queen called Natash. In leadership roles, Queens oversee hives and easily coordinate lesser strains. Queens generally can't communicate verbally, but have been observed to communicate with other species psionically. A queen named Nyadra was playable in Heart of the Swarm, where you started from a larvae to a fully grown queen, capturing and killing a Protoss ship before taking over a planet while waiting for orders from the Queen of Blades that never came. The creation of this breed of queen was carried out at the behest of the Queen of Blades, which was altered from an older breed of queen and ultimately from the Arachnis Broodkeeper. Banelings could have looked like these different concept art drawings. In Starcraft 2, the Banelings are the fifth playable unit. Banelings are created from Zerglings. Due to the additional size of the Baneling, the legs are thicker and their feet are replaced with sharp spikes. Banelings were first made on Sorona during a Terran siege where queens added native acidic mold to a Zergling, creating the first Banelings. Banelings in Heart of the Swarm campaign can morph into two other variations, the Splitter strain on the left and the Hunter strain on the right. The Splitter strain was found on the planet Lilith. It will cause the Banelings to split in two on death, creating smaller versions of itself. The Hunter strain was found on the planet Scoria, which causes the Banelings to leap over obstacles and onto targets from range. It can also jump up and down cliffs, much like the Zergling Raptor strain. Aberrations could have looked like these different concept art drawings. In Starcraft 2, the Aberrations are the sixth playable unit. Aberrations are former Terrans who have undergone extreme mutation from the Zerg hyper-evolutionary virus. In the DLC, Heart of the Swarm, Zagara, a Zerg queen, made it so the Aberrations could be spawned from larvae, rather than just infections. Originally, the Aberration was meant to be a cross between the Banelings and the infested Terrans shown by the bubble and boils on its back. However, its combat role was changed. Roaches used to look like this in Starcraft 1, but now look like this. In Starcraft 2, the Roaches are the seventh playable unit. Roaches are one of the more armoured breeds of Zerg, with high regeneration when burrowed. The Roaches were originally designed as a melee unit, which animations can still be seen when Roaches are close to enemies. Roaches in the Heart of the Swarm campaign can morph into two other variations, the Corruptor strain on the left and the Vile strain on the right. The Corruptor strain has the ability to damage an enemy and if killed quickly will spawn two Roachlings. The Vile strain has the ability to slow down units using acidic saliva that acts as a constrictive agent. Roaches were evolved from the fast-healing Xantar slug from the tropical world of Gyrax. Hydralisks used to look like this in Starcraft 1, but now look like this. In Starcraft 2, the Hydralisks are the 8th playable unit. The Hydralisks are one of the Zerg's basic frontline creatures, forming the backbone of their onslaughts. Hydralisks in the Heart of the Swarm campaign can morph into 2 other variations, the Impaler strain on the left and the Lurker strain on the right. The Impaler strain will morph into an Impaler, which is highly effective against armoured units. The Lurker strain will morph into a Lurker, which is highly effective against multiple light ground units. Hydralisks were evolved from the Slitheen, which were peaceful herbivores. They were also called caterpillar cows. Due to the fierce nature of the Hydralisk, an annual Hydralisk Derby has also become an established event in Terran society, where Terrans hunt feral Hydralisks in the wastelands of Marsara. Mutalisks used to look like this in Starcraft 1, but now look like this. In Starcraft 2, the Mutalisks are the 9th playable unit. Mutalisks form the main bulk of the flying forces of the Zerg. Mutalisks are amongst some of the most adaptable Zerg subspecies, being able to evolve into Guardians, Devourers, Broodlords, and Vipers. Mutalisks in Heart of the Swarm campaign can morph into 2 other variations, the Broodlord strain on the left and the Viper strain on the right. The Broodlord strain will besiege ground targets from range by creating Broodlings. The Viper strain will pull units from one location and bring it below them, where it will be stunned so that ground forces can annihilate it. Mutalisks can fly in space. They do this by excreting gas, which is used as propulsion. They still flap their wings in space due to instinct, however. Mutalisks are evolved from the Mantis Screamer from the desolate Daenerys sector. Lurkers used to look like this in Starcraft 1, but now look like this. In Starcraft 2, Lurkers evolved from Hydralisks. Compared to other Zerg strains, Lurkers are arachnid in appearance. Lurkers serve as defensive warriors for hive clusters and outlying Zerg colonies. Lurkers were first evolved from the Tiamat brood Hydralisks. The Tiamat was specialised in tactical space combat and rarely fielded any ground creatures. The only weakness of Lurkers is that it's virtually defenceless while above ground. The Brutalisk first appeared in Starcraft 2 and looks like this. The Brutalisk is a variant strain of the Ultralisk, which resembles a cross between a Zergling and a Hydralisk. While powerful, Brutalisks have a very slow movement rate. Fast-moving units easily dominate Brutalisks by utilising hit-and-run tactics. During the end of the war, a number of Brutalisks were enslaved by Amon and incorporated into his brood. The Brutalisk was designed initially as a unit for multiplayer in Wings of Liberty during its development. The unit had gone through over 10 iterations before being finally removed. The multiplayer Brutalisk was much smaller than its campaign appearance. The Broodlord was originally morphed from the Corruptor. Broodlords are massive manta-like flying creatures that serve as the Swarm's aerial siege units. Broodlords are one of the last additions to the Swarm, replacing the Guardian of previous conflicts. The glowing bulbs on the Broodlord's back are an evolution of the cancerous growths in the Corruptor's tentacles. The Broodlord has clusters of broodlings squirming under its carapace at any given time. Concepts were made for a Broodlord hero in Heroes of the Storm, named Broody the Broodlord by the developers, who would be a full flying hero, and the character was never released, however. In the Heart of the Swarm campaign, the Viper is an evolution of the Mutalisk. The Viper combines several vicious biological weapons to weaken enemy forces and give an edge to the Swarm. As one of the original Zerg broods, Vipers of the Leviathan brood exhibit more defiler tendencies than the rest of the Swarm. Vipers were originally a type of primal Zerg. Their uniquely vicious defense drew the attention of Abathur, who brought their essence into the Zerg Swarm. Vipers enslaved by the Cerberus program were given a hammerhead cranial implant that enhanced their accuracy of the proboscis. Ultralisks used to look like this in Starcraft 1, but now look like this. Ultralisks are the most powerful ground strain the Swarm possesses. By the Brood War, prolonged exposure to Vespene gas has resulted in an enhancement to the Ultralisk's physical capabilities. During the Second Great War, some Ultralisks were combined with the essence of Xeris Primal Zerg, making them a truly unstoppable killing machine. Ultralisks evolved from the docile Brontolith, a creature that the Ultralisk now bears little resemblance to. This is how the Ultralisks have evolved during their discovery. Kerrigan can summon an Ultralisk in Heroes of the Storm. Swarm hosts are generated by the Infestation Pit. The swarm host burrows into the ground in order to provide a seemingly endless supply of locusts. The swarm hosts of the Leviathan brood are uniquely specialised for amphibious assault and bear many genetic advantages that allow them to quickly move through the oceans and assail their prey. Swarm hosts in the Heart of the Swarm campaign can morph into two other variations, the Carrion strain on the left and the Creeper strain on the right. The Carrion strain will spawn flying locusts that attack ground units. The Creeper strain is able to travel quickly to any location on the map with creep. Progenitors of the swarm hosts, named primal hosts, were first encountered by the swarm utilised by the primal Zerg on Xeris, used against Kerrigan forces by the pack leader Brack. This is what the Infestors look like. Perhaps the Infestors' most dangerous feature is the neural parasite, a multi-mouth symbiotic creature living within the Infestors, that when spat, attaches to an enemy and controls its mind for a short period of time. Infestors are known to ingest infected marines to use as terror weapons on the battlefield, carrying them to combat zones. Hardened plates of a simulated mould and fungus offer infestors protection from enemy fire and would-be predators. The neural parasite embeds itself near the top of the spine of a victim, and the parasite host can still communicate through the creature's native language to their former allies. Evolved from the Borba matriarch and its use by the Zerg in 2503, Infestors are one of the more insidious new additions to the swarm. This is what the Overseer looks like. Overseers are genetically altered Overlords that have a mass of additional sockets filled with highly evolved optical receptors with hypersensitive retinas. Unlike most other Zerg breeds, but like Overlords, Overseers have the ability to act with appropriate judgment, but are severely limited in their mental flexibility. This latest evolution allows the Overseer to detect hidden enemies units, including those that are burrowed, underground, or cloaked. Overseers are capable of hearing, processing, and understanding Terran speech. The fins and tendrils of the Leviathan brood Overseers are bred to specialise in reconnaissance, allowing them to cut through both air and water with minimal effort. This is what the Ravager looks like. The Ravager is a Zerg artillery unit evolved from the Roach. The Ravager is not in the Heart of the Swarm campaign. In use by 2505, the Ravager is the result of years of twisting and fine-tuning the genome of the Roach far beyond its biological limitations. Ravagers are effective against key units that are otherwise difficult for the Zerg to deal with, such as siege tanks, liberators, and deployed warp prisms. Occasionally, the Ravager's exoskeletons would calcify, allowing for more durable armour. Abertha considered the result's intimidation factor of such armour to be added bonus. This is what the Corruptor looks like. A genetic marvel, Corruptors are giant brain-like creatures with snapping beaks and dangling tentacles. Its core genus of the strain is unknown, however. Corruptors possess the ability to morph into Broodlords. Once the swarm gains air and space superiority, its Corruptor fleet can morph and help turn the tide of a ground war. Designed solely for the use against aerial targets, Corruptors are used against capital ships and are deeply feared by both Terrans and Protoss. Despite their essence seemingly having been lost from the swarm, Kerrigan used Corruptors in her attack on the Mobius Corpse facility. Leviathan brood Corruptors adapt themselves to survive in high-gravity environments. This is what the Leviathans look like. Leviathans are the Zerg equivalent of a capital ship. They are classified as a Class 10 Zerg flyer and are the largest in Terran records. Leviathans are typically armed with a daunting array of bioweapons. Giant hollow tentacles resembling those of spine crawlers can grab smaller craft or puncture the hulls of larger ships and insert Zerg boarding parties. Leviathans were once space-born creatures before being infested by the Zerg, turning them into armoured carriers. They can operate in temperature conditions of near absolute zero and are capable of travelling through warp space. So what has been your favourite Zerg unit so far? We'll now be moving on to Terrans, and then after that we'll be moving on to the Protoss. So please comment, subscribe and join our Discord below.